Welcome to the deep dive. We are plunging straight into a really specific passage today. It's the book of Numbers, chapter 35, verses 1 through 8.
That's right. We've been looking at excerpts focused right on this section, and it covers this, fascinating command given to the ancient Israelites about land distribution.
Right.
But surprisingly, it holds some pretty profound insights for how we think about our own resources today.
Yeah, it takes us back, doesn't it, to that moment right before the Israelites entered the promised land, getting ready for their inheritance.
Exactly. And God gives Moses these instructions for the people, specifically about setting aside certain cities.
And these cities weren't for just anyone, right?
Yeah.
They were specifically for the Levites.
Mm-hmm. So our goal in this deep dive really is to unpack the nuts and bolts of this ancient instruction, the who, what, where, how.
Get into the details.
Yeah, and then see what timeless principles kind of emerge that might, challenge our perspective on what we have and how we share it.
All right, so let's set the scene. God is speaking to Moses. Where exactly are they, and what's the big picture context here?
Okay, so they're on the plains of Moab. That's right beside the Jordan River near Jericho. It's a really pivotal moment.
Okay.
I mean, the long wilderness journey is basically ending, and the people are they're poised to cross over and inherit the land God promised their ancestors.
So these instructions are literally about preparing them for life in that land.
Absolutely. It's practical preparation.
And central to this specific command are the Levites. Now, we hear a lot about the 12 tribes getting their land portions, but the Levites, they're different. Why weren't they getting, a regular piece of the tribal pie?
Yeah, that's really crucial context. The Levites were set apart for a specific role. They were the priestly tribe,
Right.
responsible for the tabernacle, later the temple, of course, for worship, teaching, and basically serving the spiritual needs of the whole nation.
Mm-hmm.
So their inheritance wasn't land in the same way. It was, you could say, God himself, and also the support provided by the other tribes. Because their work involved serving all the tribes, scatter among them. They didn't get one large, exclusive territory like Judah or Ephraim did.
Okay, that makes sense then of why the other tribes needed to contribute to them.
Mm-hmm.
So what specifically were the other tribes commanded to give the Levites from their own inheritance?
Well, the command was pretty clear. They could give cities from their tribal territories.
Yeah.
And these weren't just, temporary places. These were cities for the Levites and their families to actually dwell in permanently.
And it wasn't just the city itself, the buildings. The text gets surprisingly specific about the land around the cities, too.
It really does. It specifies pasture lands surrounding these cities. First, there's this measurement of 1,000 cubits outwards from the city wall in every direction.
1,000 cubits. What's that roughly?
Oh, around 1,500 feet, maybe a bit more. So think of that as an inner ring, a pretty generous space immediately surrounding the city.
Yeah, that's quite substantial. For grazing, maybe small gardens right near the city.
Exactly. But then the text adds another instruction, which honestly can sound a little confusing at first glance.
Okay.
It says, outside of that first 1,000 cubits, they were to measure 2,000 cubits on each of the four sides, east, south, west, and north, with the city still in the center.
Huh. So not just one measurement. It's like two distinct zones of pasture land.
Yes, you can kind of visualize it that way. The first 1,000 cubits is the closest area. Then, going out from the edge of that zone, you measure an additional 2,000 cubits along the perimeter of a larger square or rectangle that encloses everything.
Got it.
This basically provided a larger, clearly defined area specifically for the Levites' livestock and, other communal needs connected to their cities.
Wow, that level of precision for pasture land, not even prime farmland, is really striking. Mm-hmm. So, okay, how many cities in total were the Levites supposed to receive from all the tribes put together?
The total number given in the text is 48 cities, along with, of course, all these specified pasture lands.
48 cities spread out among the tribes. And wasn't there a special category within that number mentioned?
Right, exactly. Within the 48, 6 cities were designated specifically as cities of refuge.
Cities of refuge. What was their purpose?
These were special places. Someone who had accidentally, unintentionally caused the death of another person could flee there for protection.
Protection from what?
From the avenger of blood. Typically a relative of the deceased seeking vengeance until the case could be properly judged by the community.
Okay, so a safety zone pending trial.
Precisely. And the remaining 42 cities were the, let's say, regular dwelling cities for the Levites.
Okay, so summing up the command, 48 cities total, plus these detailed pasture lands, all for the Levites, with 6 of those cities having that special refuge status. Now, the key principle, and this is where it gets really interesting for us today, I think, comes in verse 8.
Yes, verse 8. This describes how the tribes were actually supposed to contribute those 48 cities. It states, and I'm paraphrasing slightly here, "From the larger tribes you shall take many, and from the smaller tribes you shall take few."
Okay.
And then it adds the core idea. Each, in proportion to the inheritance that it inherits, shall give of its cities to the Levites.
There it is. In proportion. What does that principle really signify in this context?
It means God wasn't asking for an equal number, flat rate from every single tribe. He wasn't saying, okay, everybody chip in 3 cities.
Right.
The requirement was tied directly, specifically, to what each tribe had received in their land inheritance. So if a tribe got a huge territory because they were a larger population, they were expected to contribute more cities for the Levites.
And conversely.
Yeah, if they got a smaller territory, maybe less fertile land or just a smaller area, they gave fewer cities.
So more required from those who received more, less from those who received less. It's presented as a, very fair approach.
Absolutely. It scales the expectation based on the capacity, on the blessing, you could say, that they had been given by God in the first place.
Okay, so we've dug into the history, the specifics of the command cities, cubits, refuge, and this really important principle of proportional giving tied to inheritance. Now let's pivot. The text we looked at takes this ancient command and pulls out some pretty powerful insights for us, living thousands of years later.
Yes, and this is where it really starts to challenge our everyday thinking, I believe. One of the primary ideas highlighted is this: everything we have, ultimately, is a gift.
That definitely pushes back against our default setting, doesn't it?
Wow.
The I earned this mentality.
It really does. In our culture, we're so conditioned to think, look, I worked hard for this, I earned this degree, this job, this income. It's mine because I built it.
And this passage points to something, deeper.
It reminds us that, just like the Israelites' land wasn't something they conquered purely by their own strength, it was fundamentally an inheritance given by God. Everything we possess, our abilities, our opportunities, our resources, even just the health and energy to work, it all flows from an ultimate source beyond ourselves.
So seeing our resources as entrusted rather than solely earned, that changes the whole picture.
It really does. That distinction, earned versus entrusted, it fundamentally shifts how we might view our time, our talents, our money, everything.
Okay, that's a big one. What's the second insight drawn from this command?
Well, it directly mirrors that principle we just talked about from verse 8. Give according to what you've received.
Okay, so just as the tribes gave proportionally based on the land they inherited.
Exactly. The same concept the source suggests applies to us. If you've been blessed with more capacity, maybe that's greater financial abundance, maybe it's more free time, maybe influential connections or specific skills and talents, the principle here suggests you're positioned to give more.
So it's not about demanding an equal amount from everyone.
No, not at all. It's about a proportional contribution flowing from the abundance that's been entrusted to you. It recognizes different capacities.
And this giving, it can play out in lots of different ways today, right? Not just money.
Oh, absolutely. It could be supporting your local church or a missionary financially, sure. But it could also be generously giving your time to volunteer for a cause you believe in. It could be using your specific professional skills, accounting, legal, tech, whatever, to help someone in need or a nonprofit organization.
It's about giving from what God has given you.
Precisely. Giving from your particular inheritance, so to speak.
Okay, so insight 1. Everything is ultimately a gift, entrusted, not just earned. Insight 2, give proportionally according to what you've received. What's the third key point that came out?
The third one is about the attitude behind the giving. Give with joy, not out of obligation, or worse, guilt.
The motivation matters a lot.
Hugely. The source material really emphasizes that giving isn't meant to feel like a burdensome duty, like paying taxes or something.
Right.
When we truly recognize God as the ultimate provider of everything, the source suggests, then giving becomes this natural overflow. It comes from a grateful heart.
So it's not driven by, I should do this, or feeling pressured.
Ideally, no. It's motivated by thankfulness for the gifts we've already received. Less obligation, more gratitude.
That sounds less like, paying a debt and more like an act of worship, maybe even trust.
That's exactly the connection made. Giving generously from this perspective becomes an expression of trust. It's like saying, God, I see that you are my provider, you're the source of all this, and I trust that you will continue to provide.
So I can afford to be generous.
Exactly. I trust you'll keep providing, allowing me to share what I have to support things you care about. Just as the Israelites supported the Levites who served the community's spiritual needs, our giving today can support people and causes and work that aligns with God's purposes in the world.
Wow. That really does transform the idea of giving, doesn't it? From maybe a chore or something you feel you have to do into something deeply meaningful and tied to our actual relationship with God. It's amazing how this ancient command about land for the Levites has led us to some really challenging but also freeing ideas about our resources today.
It is remarkable, isn't it, how relevant these ancient instructions can still feel. They really compel us to look at our lives, our stuff, our time through a completely different lens.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe let's leave you, the listener, with a few thoughts to ponder, inspired by the ideas we've explored from Numbers 35.
Yeah, maybe ask yourself, when you look at your time, your money, your talents, your opportunities, do you primarily see them as things you earned through your own effort alone? Or do you lean towards seeing them as things God has entrusted to your care? Just reflect on that default view.
And then, based on that principle of proportionality we saw so clearly in Numbers 35, how does that connect to your life? Are you currently giving, and that could be time, talent, treasure, whatever form it takes? Are you giving in a way that feels proportional to the blessings and resources you feel you've received?
And maybe one more. When you do give, what's the dominant feeling behind it? Is it often a sense of maybe reluctant obligation, or does it sometimes or often feel like a joyful, grateful expression of trust in God's provision?
It's quite a journey we took. We started way back on the plains of Moab, looking at these really specific instructions for land distribution, even down to the cubits for pasture, all for a specific tribe in ancient Israel, the Levites.
And yet, within those ancient specifics, we found this powerful, timeless principle, giving proportionally based on what was received.
Which then led us to these profound insights that really challenge our modern views, didn't they? Urging us to see our resources primarily as gifts, to think about giving based on the capacity we've actually been given, and maybe most importantly, to cultivate a spirit of joyful trust in our generosity.
Yeah, that spirit of giving seems key.
Perhaps the most compelling question this passage leaves us with, right from the heart of its message, is this. Could embracing the idea of our resources as entrusted gifts from a generous provider, could that be the very key to unlocking a more joyful, less burdened, more trust-filled generosity in our own lives? Maybe transforming giving from what feels like a burden to what feels like a blessing. Something to think about.